Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr Junaid Hussain and welcome to this episode of Seha Strategy. With me today is Dr Mohammed al-Ubaydli, who is the CEO of Patients Knows Best and is incidentally our first GCC citizen guest representing the Kingdom of Bahrain. So welcome, Mohammed, to this episode.
Shukran, Junaid. Real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm delighted to be the first.
Yeah, Bahrain nipping it ahead of Saudi and the UAE, so fantastic. Well,
Right too.
thank you so much Mohammed for joining us today. I usually get started with the podcast by asking a bit to explain to the audience and to myself a bit about yourself, your background, and sort of what's led you through your career, the early stages, to where you are, not necessarily right now, but sort of to what led up to Patients Knows Best, if that's okay.
Sure. I trained as a doctor and a programmer, and the reason for that was I thought that the most interesting things in healthcare could be solved by understanding technology. In particular, chaos science, what interested me, which is unpredictable systems like the immune system, the heart, the brain, and so on. And so when professors hear in medical school that you can program, they bring you into the most interesting projects. And for me to write the software for a radiologist, he had to teach me radiology. For me to write the software for the professor of cardiology, he had to teach me how the electricity goes through the heart. So it was very interesting to go into medical school with those skills. I always knew I wanted to start my own company. I just didn't know what problem to focus on. And so I thought the best way is to work on as many problems as quickly as possible until I'd find one that grabbed me. And in 2007, I was asked to write a book about giving patients their medical records. That was the thing that I thought I could spend the rest of my life working on this problem and still enjoy it. That's what Patients Know Best came out of.
Fantastic. Already, I'm seeing a theme that I've seen sort of increase exponentially more recently, but it's the clinician, not just turned founder, the clinician turned tech, and you did it really early. I was browsing through your CV of sorts, and I was seeing that it's in the early 2000s, I think it was, where you sort of diverged into that path. You've given me a little bit of information about that. Tell us a bit more about how that happened. I know you said you're doing both at the same time, but if you can dig into a bit of what happened there, because that's really interesting. We're seeing a lot of clinicians doing it now. I've seen a lot of clinicians from the Gulf region in particular doing this now, but you seem to be an early trendsetter in that respect.
Yeah, for me, I read this book in A-levels called Chaos, which wasn't about the NHS. It was about systems that are unpredictable, like the weather, earthquakes, the economy. And every chapter described specialists in that domain who learned how to program to model the chaos of that domain. So how to model the economy, an economist learned how to program. How do you model earthquakes? A geologist learned how to program. And there was one section that said, of course, the body is full of chaotic systems, but I couldn't find any doctors in the book who had learned how to program. So people say you were brave or you're clever. I was just an 18-year-old who thought, well, this sounds sensible, I'll do that. So I applied to medical school, and they said to me, what kind of specialist, what kind of doctor do you want to be? I said, I don't want to practice. I just want to write software. And I began telling them with excitement about this book. So 4 of them on the spot said, you're wasting our time, and turned me down. But one of them said yes. And so when they gave me the placement, I said, okay, can I then take a gap year? And in that year, I will learn how to program. And then every summer holiday in medical school, I would get a programming job with some of those professors. But it started from me doing medicine so that I can program, rather than doing medicine then deciding I should program.
So you went really down that passion of programming, and I find it incredible. Quite early on, you had that drive, and you were very brave in medical school interview to give an answer.
It was total naivety, Junaid. It was terrible careers advice in case someone's listening.
Because the normal, we want to help people and we want to do that, and all this, and we love science and those sorts of things. And yeah, so no, it's the fact that you did that, and the medical school accepted you. It's a really interesting and unique build up there. And what happened after that? So did you practice as a doctor, and what led to those few years afterwards before you shifted on to? And I know you mentioned that you wrote a book and so on. What happened in those subsequent years after medical school?
I'll add one more thing, Junaid. So in my last year at medical school, I read about the biography of Osler, Osler's Notes. And what he was a Canadian-born doctor who then co-founded Johns Hopkins. And what he did early in his career is that he went to Germany to study under Virchow, Virchow's triads, study pathology. Because in those days, pathologists were technicians in the basement of a hospital, in blood, up to their elbows in blood and cadavers. And real doctors, didn't do that. But he was the first one to say a doctor should learn pathology. And then following that, Johns Hopkins was all about every clinician must understand pathology because the symptoms, the observations, the test results, everything follows from understanding the pathology, the original cause. And it's my belief that in the 21st century, everything interesting in medicine must require a founding in information technology. Not that everybody's going to be a pathologist or a technologist, but you have to know it just like you have to know how to use a stethoscope. So to me, it opens up lots of interesting things to do in medicine. And in my case, despite my plan of not practicing, I enjoyed being on the ward so much. I did 1 year GP house job in King's Lynn. So 4-month GP, 4-month medicine, 4-month surgery. And during that time, I began writing software for these things called Palm Pilots. They're sort of £100 computers. And I wrote software for it that let me do ward rounds with my colleagues. So I convinced each of my colleagues to buy their own Palm Pilot for £100, including the nurses. And then I wrote software. We would keep the medical records on the Palm Pilot encrypted. And then when you'd see someone, you point your Palm Pilot at theirs, and it would transfer the information using infrared, like a remote control. So that was the handover. We would just point our machines at each other. And all of us, as we walked around the hospital, would give each other the records. So I thought that was, very enjoyable, but also useful for other people to learn. And so I wanted to write a book about it. I called up all the publishers and said, I've done this. I think there should be a book about this. And all of them said there's no market. And I got really irritated one day, and it was just bloody minded. So I thought, how hard is it to actually be a publisher? So I got a book about how to set up your own publishing company, wrote a book about Palm Pilots in healthcare, and sold it. People began buying it from all over the world. And then the BMJ did a review about it, and that's what then got Wiley to buy the book off me. So a lot of it was just I find something interesting, I drill deep into it, and then stuff happens as a result. So a lot of it was just following my curiosity.
But I love how you don't see a barrier as a barrier, but you're looking at it as, okay, I can't publish a book, so I'm going to create a publishing house that's going to publish a book. Because from hell to water, I'm going to get that book published. And you touched on a really, really, really interesting point that I'm so glad to hear it from somebody else as well. In that, I've sort of said recently that the technology is becoming the new surgical knife or the new stethoscope of sorts for clinicians
Yes.
who are tired of waiting for others to make change and trickle down to them. But the threshold and the barrier to get into creating your own solutions as clinicians has never been lower, in my opinion. Obviously, there are barriers still. There's steps of regulation and so on, but actually, to get something that's working, and functional that's a really, really amazing point you made. Let's come on to so you mentioned about the book is written around patient records, I believe, and tell us how that led to, what's the relationship between that and getting to patients knows best. How did that journey?
So the book was called Handhelds for Doctors, and it was basically how to use that technology as a doctor. And at the same time, I got a job in the States in the National Institute of Health as PubMed. It's published by something called NCBI inside NIH, and they were setting up a digital publishing house. So they were doing textbooks alongside all the papers. And I ended up going there with the lady who became my wife. So she wrote the textbooks and I wrote the software for her textbooks. And then during those years in the States, I just kept on writing books. So I wrote one about smartphones. A chef called me from Baltimore saying, I've read your books about handhelds for doctors. Surgeons are just like chefs. They're short of time and temper. So can we rewrite? So we wrote handhelds for chefs. And she showed me how to basically everything that happens in an operating theatre, all the stress for a surgeon, she has to go through as a chef in trying to make sure there's hygiene and supply chain and so on. So I kept going, and then one year in 2007, I was asked to write a book about giving patients their medical records. This was for my hospital CIO customers, and I got really obsessed with that as I wrote the book because I'm a patient with a rare disease. So when I see a doctor, he panics, doesn't know what to do, and I end up telling him. But I tell him things that I've been taught by my doctors and nurses. And so as I wrote the book about giving the patients their medical records, I thought this is it. This could help so many people, just like my doctors and nurses to help me. And I really want this to happen. And I spent about a year sulking in the States because no one was doing what the book said they should do. And then in 2000, I just snapped and said, okay, well, if no one's going to do it, but I really want this done, I'm gonna have a go. And I came back to the UK to start because I thought the other people who were trying to do it were going to have, like Microsoft and Google, they were going to have their efforts shut down by the US hospitals. But I thought NHS hospitals would like this rather than fight it. And so I'm going to start it in the UK. And if I can make it work in the UK, then other governments will insist on it in other countries. So that's how I started in 2008.
2006, so we're going now 16 years, 17 years almost.
So 17 years, yeah.
And what, I suppose, what was the original MVP for Patient Knows Best, and how did that evolve? What was the original thing that you made or that came about?
It was a website where a doctor could register and a patient could register, and a doctor or a clinician could send a message to a patient and attach anything to it. So the original vision was, we could do anything, you could have care plans, test results, and so on. But as I called around, I cold called specialist doctors who are dealing with complex patients, difficult situations. And one of them, Susan Hill in Great Ormond Street Hospital, she was a gastroenterologist. And she said to me, I want to send letters to the patients. She basically wanted to attach a Word document to the child's family. And I said, Susan, we can do a lot. We can do care plans. We can do tests. She goes, yep, all great. I just want to do the letter to start with because they get delayed and they get lost. And then she calls me the next day saying, I sent 5 letters to 5 families. And one of the mums messaged me back saying, there's an error in the letter. And she said, I've been a specialist for 10 years. No one's corrected my error in letters. I know they've got errors, but no one's corrected it because it was so easy. They corrected it. And then her reaction was amazing. She said, what else can I send? Because the faster I send, the faster they fix. So that was the MVP, just her being able to send things back and forth to her patients.
Isn't it amazing how healthcare records are so hospitalized, doctorized, and we almost baby the patients that they don't know what they're doing and they won't know what we're talking about. This is all just medical legal jargon and a bit of information for them and their primary care doctor. And in fact, how much patients actually teach us, and how much they own their own health, they own their own journey, and we're a part of that. We don't own their journey. They own their journey. We're just a small part of that. That's a really really cool story, and so that initial sort of, it wasn't a trial I suppose, but a trial of sorts. That initial model, how has that? I'm guessing it's changed a lot over time. Obviously, the net has evolved over time. Technology's evolved over time. What have been the salient points of journey in that journey? How is it? Where is it now? I suppose, and how did it evolve from where it was to where it is now?
So, clinician no longer has to manually transfer the data. So where she manually attached a Word document, we now automatically release 22 million test results every month. And the patient doesn't have to wait for the doctor to register them. The patient can register with their NHS login. 125,000 people find us and register every month using the NHS app. And then the more patients register, the more data we get for them. So with the GP record, as soon as someone's registered, we pull the GP record without the GP knowing about it or needing to do anything about it. It's part of the national offering. But the idea is still the same in that one record, however the data got in, however the patient got in, it's owned by the patient, and the patient can share it with everybody else. And that's what solves all the legal issues around safety, sharing, quality, care.
Here's a question for you. And we're going to come on to the GCC part of things as well, because I hear it there as well a lot. Interoperability.
Yes.
How does this work within that context? So patients now own their record. It's online. They can access it. Are they able to carry it to different primary care centres or different clinicians? How does the clinician gain access to it? Can they take it abroad? What's the functionality like in that respect?
So a patient can give anyone access anywhere in the world. You just enter the email address and they get access. And when they get access, it will show it to them in their language, because the system works in 23 different languages. So if you go to France and you share it with a French doctor, they'll be able to see the user interface in French, for example. What we really want is that the patient isn't manually sharing. It's that it's automatically appearing in the doctor's record system. So whenever one of our customers sends us data about a patient, we immediately give them access to the full record of the patient, because that provider has shown they are doing direct care for that patient. And so we just share the data, and the patient gets told the hospital now has access to your record. If you want to change the sharing, you can dial it down. But of course, what patients really want is to increase the sharing and increase the speed. We also do things like single sign-on to GP systems, EMIS, System 1, Cerner, Orion Shared Care Records, and so on. But these things require the doctor to be, or the organization to be working with us. So the easiest thing is either the patient just invites a clinician individually or just turns up in clinic and shows them what they've got on their phone. And just the showing is enough. A lot of clinicians in the early days said, I can't release a radiology report because the patient doesn't understand what it means. Many of them do, but they don't need to. The patient is the vehicle of data sharing. So they might not know what the radiology report is, but when they go to the A&E department and they show the radiology report, that increases the safety of the patient in front of that doctor.
Makes a lot of sense. And it seems just an obvious solution in some respects, but it's amazing how we've been through healthcare so long without even having this consideration in place. Again, because of the doctor-centric, hospital-centric approach. Can you give me a really good example with the doctor from Great Ormond Street, who used it? Can you share any positive stories from maybe another story from a patient's perspective and a doctor's perspective that would give us like an idea of the impact that it's made?
Susan, when I first saw her, that doctor, the consultant at Great Ormond Street, she described the children she was looking after. They were intestinal failure patients, and then she described that when that child goes to the A&E department, the person who knows most about that child is the parent, usually the mum, and the person who doesn't get listened to is the mum. So they wait as they fax Great Ormond Street back and forth. And Susan worried about that because that doctor who saw the child, that's the first child they've seen with that illness. And I recognized that child, that was me with my rare disease. And I recognized that mum, that was my mum trying to defend me in the healthcare system. But so I spoke to a lot of those families early on. I was the one training them. I had just little things like the mums who had messaged the specialist nurses. They said to me, until the system came along, I couldn't sleep at night when my son was ill because I'd have to stay up until 8 o'clock in the morning when I can call the specialist nurse. And of course, when they call, the nurse is talking to somebody else. And when the nurse calls back, the parent is driving and so on. But they would stay up all night with their child's illness. They said, I can now send it at 3 o'clock in the morning. and know that the nurse who knows my child will get the message and that nurse will reply in the morning. And so I can go to sleep. And the nurses didn't have any, the stress went right down because they used to have all the crunch in the morning with the very families of very sick children calling them. Just little things like that make a difference. But we have people who've got cancer. They get their test result that helps them get their head straight. They cry at home with their family, and then they prepare for their appointment. They understand what to do. Some of them correct their emergency doctors when they go and see them because they've been given a care plan what to do. So it really transforms what a patient can do, the agency they have over their life, but also the efficiency of their care.
Quality of life as well. You're able to get that sleep. You're able to
Yes.
not worry about it. I work a significant amount in urgent care, and there's a difficulty accessing patient records. There's
Yes.
limited amount of information at times. Patients struggle sometimes to pronounce the very complicated medications that they're on, and they all sound very similar as well. And it just makes so much sense that this information is more freely available and empowers the patients this much. And you mentioned rare diseases, but any condition that empowers the patient, it has the obvious effect that it's safe for them and it helps them on the journey. It has the other effect that it improves their quality of life. It means that the following day they're not having a knock-on effect from being up all night and therefore not being able to go to work or not being able to do simple things. And that's quite, as a parent myself, that's a big thing. You don't lose a day's worth of work or have trouble with getting the shopping done or whatever else. And so these tangential benefits are actually, they feel small, but they really accumulate a lot. So you've had this penetration in the NHS now. So a lot of patients are beginning to use it here in the UK. And how did you, or what triggered, or how did you get around to expanding to the Middle East? So I know I've heard Saudi Arabia and them. I think Majma'ah University, I think it was. Tell me, how did that journey, or how did that part evolve? I can see the obvious reason that you want everybody to use this because it's a fantastic tool. But how did that journey start, or what happened there?
So we've always had small deployments across the rest of Europe. So we did a national integration in the Netherlands, and Ireland's first patient portal is St Patrick's Hospital using Patients Know Best. But these were really people approaching us outside of the UK saying, will you bring your technology to the country, which of course we're delighted to. But a couple of years ago, as we were sort of looking up to say, okay, where would we, if we were starting from scratch, rather than responding to opportunity, where would we target? And the obvious geography was to go for the Middle East, for the Gulf. They're similar income levels. They like learning what works in the UK and the NHS especially. And for me personally, I'm from Bahrain. It would be my pleasure to get contracts here. So we've started looking at it a couple of years ago. I just began coming to all these conferences. I remember my father told me that the person who dug for oil first in the US, in Saudi Arabia, this American guy, he started off by just going every Friday to the King's Majlis, where they're like sort of U-shaped, everyone sits on the floor and you drink coffee. And so he just drank coffee for 4 years. And then after 4 years, the king said, okay, American, what would you like? And he said, I would like to drill for oil. He said, okay, you have permission. And that's how it started. And all I could think of when my dad was saying this was, I hate coffee. I really didn't want the length of time, but that is the only way. And it was particularly important following COVID because a lot of the companies that had been in the Gulf before COVID left during COVID. They just couldn't, with the lockdowns, they couldn't fulfill. And so they had a real distrust of companies that would come in for a couple of months and then leave. So you had to show that you were intending to be here. And then August last year, I moved to, because my parents are getting quite elderly, I moved to live in Bahrain. And so I would just tell people, I'm in Bahrain, I'm your neighbor now. I would drive back and forth to Saudi. And so over time, that just gained people's trust. And then we could have a conversation about how they could use PKB. And Al Marafa University is the first example of that. That's the medical school using this in Riyadh in Saudi.
Amazing. And trust is such a big thing in the region. My experience in Saudi Arabia, it takes time. There's a
Yes.
natural element of caution to someone who's just come in. You can't be as excitable sometimes as we are in the UK, trying to just shove solutions in and try and run on momentum. It requires those gradual connections and trust. And so that really resonates. That point really resonates with me a lot from my experience there. Um, so how are you able to share any information about how things are going with that deployment that you mentioned in Saudi Arabia, or are there more that are coming off the back of that, or what's happening there? And yeah,
So at Marafa University, we launched them a couple of weeks ago, and it was really nice that I could give a lecture there to all the students. So they're incorporating the medical curriculum where they teach them about medical records, and they practice doing things with the patients in a medical record. But the professor who's leading this, Professor Nasriya, I really like working with her because obviously what she's doing is important. She's teaching this next generation, but she's also really creative. So as soon as we did that lecture, she comes back and she's got more ideas. Could we do this with our students who are trying to build software? So we're now going to do one of those projects they can use. They can build their own app on top of the Patients Know Best APIs. Or could we do this with our informatics students who have to do usability testing? So she's now going to, they might put forward a project to test the usability of PKB. So she's really creating new ways to incorporate digital in general and PKB in particular into the curriculum. And the students that I got to speak to when I was there, they were just really optimistic and interested about the future in digital. Each of them was looking for career paths they can take in that. So it's a really nice community, and the students absolutely love her.
it's such a common theme as you now. And I'm glad the universities are picking up on it, and people who are forward thinking as well are picking up on this. That the importance of combining the medical skills with
Yes.
digital tools, and this is a classic example. And whether it's with Patient Knows Best or whether it's with another tangential project, there's so much that can be done with combining that knowledge. Here's a question for you. Where did you experience any what was the biggest challenge, I suppose, in deploying in the region? So, so you've been in the UK, you've been in Cambridge, you've worked, from what I can tell, most of your life in the UK. You've had time in the United States as well. And you mentioned, you touched on the point about knowing people in the region. Were there any other challenges or obstacles, and how did you overcome those?
In the Gulf region.
In the Gulf region, yeah.
So in the Gulf regions, what you need is time because the people in the Gulf are friendly. They are. You don't need to change their minds about things. They will take a meeting. I give two practical recommendations. So when we first started, we worked with an organization called Healthcare. So they organized lots of events. So in terms of being at events, sort of marketing in general, Healthcare are good. If you're a company thinking to expand into the Gulf, they operate in other territories as well. And then the second year that I was doing this, I got to speak to Global Innovative Health. So they're really good for sales. So they, the two people who run it basically have lots of deep connections with healthcare providers. So the first time I worked with them was they arranged for a 4-day trip. They included me, PKB, and two other companies that were trying to sell in the area. And they arranged 4 days of back-to-back meetings with CIOs at pretty much every healthcare provider in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And they were able to do that because each of those CIOs really trusted the people from GIH. They built relationships over 25 years. And because there were 3 companies coming in each hour, it was a good use of the CIO's time. So that was a really efficient way to meet lots of people. And then after that, I would just go to every single event in the Gulf. So every couple of months, there's something. And you just walk around the halls. Their events here are different to the Western ones because it's not just the sellers who are exhibiting, the buyers are also exhibiting. So the hospitals want to meet different solution providers. You can just walk around and meet all of them.
I had my first second experience with Zimam recently with Dr. Hussain in Dubai. And it
If you
was
know him, you know everyone.
yeah, it was fantastic. It was so refreshing. The actual event was, and the standard was really. I was just my jaw was dropping at some of the things that were coming out, and I was just like, this is the way things should be done. And so I know exactly what you're saying. It's very impactful the meetings that they have,
Yes.
and obviously Arab Health is another one. Global Health Exhibition is another one. But enough about the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Bahrain.
Yes.
But Bahrain, and so my only experience with Bahrain, I'm being completely honest here, I have two experiences. One is watching Formula One, and the other is a short stop on Gulf Air at the airport in Bahrain, which is nice and big and clean and
Yes.
very fancy. But tell me more about Bahrain as a landscape for healthcare and healthcare innovation and the type of work that you're doing because. Uh, Often I hear people say Bahrain is small. It's a country, yes, geographically it's small, but actually it's quite impactful from various different angles. Can you shed some light on Bahrain for us and for me in particular, I suppose, as the questioner, because my knowledge is limited.
So Bahrain is 1.5 million people, about half expats, half locals, and it was the first to find oil. So it was the first to internationalize. If you live in other countries in the Gulf, obviously everyone's friendly, but in general, you will only make friends with the locals in Bahrain compared to other countries. It's an open country. People are used to expats from all over the world, and they a lot of them settle because it's a friendly country for them. Bahrain's very small economically, but it's interesting often from a policy perspective. A lot of the liberal policies happen in Bahrain first, then other countries have it. Just one small example: WhatsApp works in Bahrain. It doesn't work in other countries, right? So that just allows for a lot more liberalization. There's more mobile phone companies in Bahrain than there are in other countries, which are much bigger. So as a business environment, as a family environment to live in, it's really nice. I like it for that. But as a market size, it's half an ICS. It's 1.5 million people.
And are there any specific events or things that people should look out for in Bahrain that you're aware of that would be useful? You're right, it's a small market, but I suppose it's a small liberal market that is quite
Yes.
open to the outside. So it's a good, I suppose, a junction or a good place to dip your toe into the region in sort of a safe manner without having many constraints around you. From that angle, is it, is it a matter of approaching hospitals directly? Is it a matter of are there events there that are particularly useful to attend, or do Bahrainis and Bahraini companies go to other events like the ones in Dubai or the ones in Saudi Arabia, or is it a mixture?
So the healthcare events are limited in Bahrain, and it doesn't have the like the Arab Health of Dubai or the Global Health Exhibition in Riyadh. And so, but however, if you would like to meet up, like if you arrange a trip in a week, you could just see all the hospitals in one go, for example. And Bahrainis tend to travel to other conferences. But in terms of if you're looking for markets to enter, sort of UAE and Saudi, and then possibly Qatar, that's where the weight of purchasing comes through. The one thing I would just advise is everyone comes to Dubai, everyone comes to Riyadh, and so they're used to too many people giving them free things. So you should look at other Emirates and UAE, which are ignored, or other clusters in the Saudi Arabia that are ignored.
It makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. What's next for Patient Knows Best? What's without giving away trade secrets, but what's the roadmap for you going forward? And is it more deployment across more sites? Is it new functionality that's coming along? What's happening in patients on next?
Going in two directions. So in terms of sites, we got a contract for all of Lagos last year, so that's about to go live next month. So that's 20 million people's records from across all providers. And we're about to go live in our first Canadian province. So that's the data center in that one that's going live this month. So we're just picking up other countries, having scaled up in England with the NHS app. The other direction is the things we can do with the functionality that we have. So on the 1st of May, we allowed any patient who registers for PKB with NHS login to store their GP record in PKB. And so it shows the same information you have in the NHS app, but it shows it in a much better way. In particular, we put SNOMED codes in there. So it doesn't just say that you've got diabetes and you're taking insulin. There's a SNOMED code for diabetes and the DMND code for insulin. And then later next year, you'll see the SNOMED code for your HbA1c and your blood pressure measurement and so on. And so what that means is you can start showing the much better information to the patient. For example, you have diabetes, you're this age, but you're not taking that medication. Here's a clinical trial that matches the situation you're in. Are you interested? If so, click here and open up your medical record to that researcher. So you connect a patient to a trial very quickly. Or I see you're on the wrong medication. Your ICS says you should be on a different medication, given that the current medication hasn't led to a change in your test results. Or before you go and see a private provider, you can open up your full NHS record to them. And after they treat you, they can put data back into PKB to take into the NHS. Or before you get an insurance premium, they can look at your full NHS record rather than faxing back and forth and taking up your GP's time and filling out the forms for them. So the functionality for using your clinical record for any adult in England, the patient can use it in many more ways for research, for understanding their health, for private care, for private insurance.
Makes a lot of sense. What would your advice be, Mohammed, as a closing question, I suppose, to this? What would your advice be to not necessarily even clinicians, people who are setting out in the health innovation space, trying to solve a problem, or maybe they don't have a problem to solve, but they want to do something impactful. You've done a lot over the past couple of decades and more. What would your salient points be to them on that, who are at the beginning of this journey and trying to make impact in healthcare?
So the one thing I would just, as an offer of help, is if any of them are in England and would like to offer their solutions to our patients or our customers, we love working with them. So if you go to the Patients Know Best wiki, patientsknowbest.com, you can go to partner, and basically all the APIs are there for your product to, with the patient's permission, see the data, add data. You can do that within 20 ICSs using PKB. The main problem with healthcare is that decisions are so slow and so low. So you have to find a way of operating at a low metabolic rate for a long time until you've generated enough usage and evidence that a large purchasing decision can be made around you. And so you then have to, no matter how slow you think you've understood things, it is even slower. So you've got to find a way of going through that long journey at a very low burn rate in the beginning, which is hard. It's hard work.
Data, patient data. So this is not a controversial area, but this is an area where there's a lot of conversation going around the use of patient data, the quality of the data that's coming through. So you mentioned SNOMED as an example. The variability in coding, leads to fragmented data. Not everybody uses it so well. And obviously, one of the things we were talking about at Zimam some weeks back was around the digital twins. But then how will you create digital twins when the real world evidence is so fragmented and not very easy to align and create sort of impactful outcomes out of it? Are you able to share with us any experiences you've had in terms of managing patient data and making use of it in an effective way? So you mentioned some examples already, more sort of at scale. How can patient knows best, or how does patient knows best help with that? Yeah, and is it an opportunity, and therefore both patient knows best and also for others as well?
I got an email this morning, someone saying, I'm sorry to be petty, but my GP record shows that I did not attend an appointment, but this is not true. I did attend the appointment. So every record is full of errors, like Susan Hill found out when she sent out those first 5 letters, right? So the sooner you show the data to the patient, the sooner it gets fixed. A lot of clinicians think that because the data is poor quality, you mustn't share it until you fix it. We have to explain that only when you share it will you fix it. Because the patient has the time and they've got the interest, and it happened to them. They know what's happening. So that's the best way to get to data quality. The other side of it is that some of the most interesting data sets are actually from the patient. You were hinting at this, that we asked the patient, but people don't understand just how powerful it is. So in the 1980s, Omron, the blood pressure company in Japan, said we'll let consumers do their own blood pressure at home, and everyone said they were mad. Patients haven't been trained how to use blood pressure cuff and so on. And they didn't just discover that it was just as good as a GP's measurement. It was actually higher quality because you haven't got white coat hypertension when the patient's stressed about you doing it in the GP surgery. And also, the biggest indicator of accuracy was the number of measurements. So the more measurements you take, the better the actual blood pressure. And of course, the doctor doesn't have time to take more than one measurement every month or even 6 months, but the patient can do one every day. So putting the sensors in the patient's home gives you much better quality data. And the data sets are really quite fascinating. Your phone can detect changes in your gait for Parkinson's long before a neurologist can. It can detect changes in your voice for microphonia long before your neurologist can. These sensors are now in the patient's home at a low cost, at a high quality. When we talk about sharing data from their record, we completely ignore, most doctors ignore that record, but we're picking up those data sets inside PKB, connecting the devices in the home to the patient and putting them side by side with the things from the hospital, things from the GP and so on. You can see the audit trail, who said what when, but combining that for the first time, that's a real step change in data quality.
And yeah, that makes so much sense. And you're right. I mean, we come back to the same point again, but we baby the patients. We say,
Yes.
oh, they're going to, they won't know how to keep the records tidy. We will do that for them.
Yeah.
But actually, they know it far more effectively than we do. And yeah, so one last question from my end. The gimmick word these days, AI. Is does or has AI been on the radar for patients known best? Is that something that is integrated at the moment? Is that something you're looking at? Is it something that's not worth? Is it something you believe in or not believe in, or how does that look for you?
No, I fully believe in it. And, you mentioned it's a gimmick, right? So there's a lot to be skeptical about. One of the things I find interesting is all the business plans from 1995 to 2000 about the internet boom, all the ones that crashed, and 99% of them crashed, all of them have since come through in the following 20 years. So they were early, they weren't wrong. And I think the same thing for AI. Okay, so we might be overclaiming for what we can do in the next 5 years, but I do think the big claims are true for the following 20 years. So it's just, how do you survive through that process? From my perspective, our contribution to it is that AI acts on data, and healthcare isn't providing enough data for AI because of privacy, security, and so on. So it's always 10, 20 years behind other verticals, other industries. So what we're trying to do is put all the data in one place so the patient can open it up for AI, and then you can bring those benefits of AI into healthcare. It's just been it's been a long time coming to get there. So, but our focus is just putting all that data in one place, giving the patient access, and then the clever boffins with AI can do things on top of that.
Thanks so much, Mohammed. Do you have any questions? Any further points from your end? Anything else you'd like to share?
I just think the Gulf is very interesting as a market to approach. People normally come to it because they think it's about revenues, and they do have revenues and they do have capacity to apply changes. But It is a different healthcare system to other countries. It has different properties. And so come to it with curiosity and interest to learn what you can from the economy, and then you can be part of that health economy.
Thanks so much, Mohammed. It's been really, really insightful. Honestly, it's an amazing journey. Patient knows best. I'm going to be keeping close tabs on your journey going forward as well. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. And your podcast is an example of learning and building on that health economy. So thank you for starting that for all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.